Oxygen Blast technical seminars are an Intertech production. For instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.
You should know that in recent versions of popular browsers, this approach has been adopted. And so in modern browsers like IE8, Firefox 3.1, you can actually use the CSS style method of selection. They have two different methods available on the document object. Query selector, where you pass in your selector. That's where you will retrieve a single element. Or if you want to retrieve a set of elements, use query selector all. So if other browsers provide this, then why do we care about jQuery? What is jQuery providing for us? Well, besides having only a single method to call instead of the two that you're seeing here, you're able to apply the selector API to all the browsers that jQuery supports. So if you're trying to support IE6, you'll be able to use this selection API. In fact, the selection API is so powerful on its own that it's actually its own project. It's called Sizzle. So let's say you decide jQuery isn't for you, but you were interested in the selector API. You can actually download this on its own. It's available at sizzlejs.com. All right, so again, let's get into sort of the power of selecting elements. And that power is really going to come from filtering. So whenever I select a set of elements, each of those elements is going to be given an index. So the first element is going to have an index of 0. The next element is going to have an index of 1. And that gives me a way that I can grab a subset of the elements that I initially selected. And again, that's known as filtering. And we're filtering on the elements. So you put your element that you're going to be used, a colon, and then you use one of these selector filters. And I list a few of the popular ones here. Let me show you some actual concrete examples. So here's, again, a very simple snippet of HTML. You notice that I just have a bunch of div tags. The top 3 div tags have an attribute, an ID attribute. And you'll notice that there's a little bit of stuff happening with the value of that attribute, but that's coming up for an example coming up. Also, as we look at some of these examples, you'll see a method that I'm using called CSS. We're going to talk more about styles at the end of the presentation, but for now, just accept that the CSS method will take all the elements in that set that we've selected, and it'll apply some sort of style to it. So you see that method, that's all that it's doing. All right, so here's an example of equals. Here's my XHTML at the top of the example, and at the very bottom, right down here, you'll see where I'm actually doing my jQuery. So the first part is I pass in the elements that I want to select. I want the div tags from this document that equals 2. So what is it going to do? It's going to select all of those div tags, and it's only going to grab element with the index of number 2. After that, I'm calling the CSS method I just mentioned. And over on the right, you'll see what that would look like. So there I was able to grab a set and quickly just grab a single element. That's the equals. There's also greater than. So if I want to grab a whole set of elements, that's again a subset of my original selection, I can do something like this where I grab my div and I say I want to select all the elements that are greater than the 3rd indexed element. So that will return us a set which would be number 4 through number 7. And in this case, it changes all of those red. Now, you may already be getting a sense of the power of jQuery. You'll notice that I didn't have to call that method CSS over and over again on all the elements. I'll be coming up to a section on why that works. Another example, here I'm calling odd on all my div elements. It selects all the odd elements, changes the background color. And here is one called contains. So here it's actually looking at the text of the node. And so I can say, hey, if it contains some text, in this case, the words this is, then I want to change the background color. So again, a few examples of selecting some elements here. Let's go a little further. So what we can do besides filtering on elements is we can filter on attributes. I can filter, for example, just to make sure, hey, only give me an element if it contains this attribute name. Or I could say I will only give me an element if it has the attribute name and it equals a certain string, or if it starts with a certain string, or if it ends with a certain string. So here are some examples of that. We'll look at a little bit of code. So here's a way that I can say I want to grab all the div tags that have an attribute named ID. So how do I do that? I say, got my div that I want to grab, that's the element name, and in the square brackets, I just simply give the key, the name of the attribute that I want to exist. We're not really worried about what the value of that attribute is. We're just saying, hey, just return to me the ones that contain that particular attribute. In this case, it grabs the first three since they have the ID attribute. Another example, I want something that has the attribute of an ID, but it starts with the text number. Now, if you look at the example here for the first three, we have the word number for the first one. We have number on the second one. We also have the text number for the third, but it doesn't start with the word number. So in this case, I say here, grab the div. I want it to have the attribute of ID, and this caret equals means starts with. So I want it to start with number. And there you can see on the right side that it's grabbed the first two elements. Here's one where I say, I don't really care where the text is, but I want this text to appear somewhere inside of the value. So I use the star equals syntax and the word that I want. So now it's going to grab the number 1 and number 2 because both of those contain the attribute ID and they have the text section in there somewhere. So that's a few examples of selecting elements. Besides offering that rich and compact selector API, jQuery is going to reduce the amount of code you need by providing implicit iteration. So that's exactly what I just showed you. You notice that when I had a set of elements, I didn't need to call the method on each of them. I didn't need to create a for loop or some type of a loop and then iterate through and call the method over and over again. jQuery is going to do that for you. So let's take a look at an example. Here's a traditional example. Of course, there's a lot of different ways you can select elements and loop through, but this is a common example. I grab some particular element that has an ID of employee search, and I grab all of its child nodes. And what I want to do here is, of all the child nodes that I've got, I want to iterate through each of them. I want to make sure that I'm only grabbing divs that have an attribute of an ID, and I want to make sure that the value of that ID is not number 3. If it satisfies all of those conditions, then I'll change the color to be blue. So you'll notice here I've got my for loop up at the top. I do all my checking, and eventually I change those elements to be blue. jQuery is going to reduce all that code that you see above into one short line. So here below I've got my div, looking for divs with an ID of employee search. I then want all of the div tags that are children, that are descendants of that particular ID. Once I have that, I want to make sure that I'm not getting anything with the ID of number 3. There's all the conditional checks that we had above. Then I say I want to change those that I finally have after I filtered to be the color blue. So again, write less, do more. You take a look at these 2 examples. This is a great example of the power of jQuery and how much we're able to do with a little bit of code. So that's selecting elements. Let's look at a different area. Let's look at Ajax. There are lots of different Ajax utilities that are provided with jQuery. Some of them are just so that you can make your Ajax requests and handle the responses by yourselves. Others are provided in the plugins, the UI library, so that they'll do things like the classic examples, autocomplete. You can download a widget where you put on your page, and as people are typing, it will make suggestions as to what it is they're probably looking for. So that's Ajax functionality that's encapsulated inside of a plugin. So jQuery provides both angles here.
For more free learning resources and to see the latest lineup of our instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.